Right now, everyone is talking about Incursion, especially the possibility that Avengers Doomsday will feature an incursion involving the Fantastic Four, the X-Men and the main MCU timeline. But what exactly is an incursion? How does one begin? In this video, we are going to look at 7 major events that could potentially lead to an incursion between the Fantastic Four, the X-Men and the main MCU timeline. And surprisingly, the real culprit behind all of these incursions may actually be our god of stories, Loki. But how? Stick around because we are going to break down everything. Well bros, an incursion occurs when changes to the normal flow of time or reality create a new timeline or universe, and that universe eventually comes into conflict with another universe. In the MCU, new timelines can be created in several ways, such as traveling into the past and changing events, traveling between universes and altering something, or even using the dark hole to perform dreamwalking. And if we trace the MCU's multiversal problems back to their origins, one of the biggest starting points is Avengers Endgame. Thanos, bringing his entire army from the past to the present, created a timeline where Thanos no longer exists. Alongside his death in the present by the snap and Gamora staying in the present, similarly birthed an entirely new timeline. But perhaps the biggest event happens at the end of Avengers Endgame. Steve Rogers travels back in time and chooses to stay in the past with Peggy Carter. The moment Steve decided to remain in the past and build a life with Peggy, a major timeline divergence should have occurred. In other words, another timeline and potentially another universe was created. And based on what we've seen and heard surrounding Avengers Doomsday, these particular events may be extremely important. There is even a possibility that this alternate timeline could eventually become the universe where Doctor Doom exists. But this raises an important question. If creating a new timeline was a problem, why didn't the TVA immediately prone Steve's timeline? That is exactly what the TVA was shown doing in the Loki series. So why did they allow Steve to stay in the past? Hold on, we will come back to this point later. The next major event happened in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The movie established that using the Darkhold and performing dreamwalking can have serious consequences for the multiverse. One of the clearest examples is Sinister Strange's universe, which had already been destroyed as a result of an incursion. And then during the climax of the movie, Doctor Strange himself uses dreamwalking to stop Wanda. This creates another dangerous multiversal situation. The post-credit scene makes the consequences even clear when Claire arrives and tells Doctor Strange that he has caused an incursion. This strongly suggests that Doctor Strange himself could become one of the major causes of the incursion we see in Avengers Doomsday. Then we have an event that many fans may have forgotten about: Deadpool's time travel. At the end of Deadpool 2, Deadpool gets hold of Cable's time travel device and starts changing history. He saves his girlfriend Vanessa. He saves member of his team. He travels into the past and changes events involving Hitler. He travels to another timeline and kills one of his own variant. And in one of the movie's funniest moments, he even travels into the real world and kills Ryan Reynolds. The entire ending of Deadpool 2 is built around changing the past through time travel. At the time, Deadpool 2 wasn't considered part of the MCU, but now that Deadpool is officially part of the MCU, those events potentially have much bigger implications. If Deadpool 2 follows the MCU's rule of time travel, then Deadpool's action may have created multiple divergent timelines, and those timelines could eventually contribute to incursions. Another huge event occurred in Spider-Man No Way Home. Doctor Strange's spell accidentally opened the door for characters from other universes to enter the MCU, but the biggest problem wasn't simply that the villains arrived. For example, Green Goblin arrives in the MCU and kills Aunt May. On top of that, Peter Parker and Doctor Strange attempt to cure the other villains and send them back to their respective universes, but this creates another major problem. These villains were originally supposed to die. Now, instead of returning to their universes and following their original destinies, they are potentially going back with completely different futures that could dramatically alter their timelines and potentially create new branches of reality. So, if Tobey Maguire's or Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man eventually appears in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars, it wouldn't necessarily be surprising. Their universes may already be deeply connected to the Incursion storyline. Now, the real question is how how is Loki the actual culprit? And why didn't the TBA porn these timelines when they were created? Well bros, after the events of Avengers Endgame, Loki eventually arrived at the TBA and ultimately took control of the multiverse, becoming the god of stories. Under He Who Remains, the TBA controlled the timeline and pruned any branches that deviated from the secret timeline. In other words, there was no true free will, but Loki changed everything. By generating everyone free will, Loki allowed timelines to branch and expand in every possible direction, leading to the creation of countless new timelines and universes. And because the TBA exists outside of time, any change made there can affect the multiverses past, present and future simultaneously. So the moment Loki took his throne and chose to preserve free will, the TBA's new rules effectively applied across the entire timeline. That means the branches that had already been created and the ones that would be created in the future were no longer automatically pruned. And this is why Loki may actually be the ultimate reason these incursions are happening. He didn't directly cause every incursion, instead he created the condition that allowed all these timeline and universes to exist in the first place. So what do you think? Is Loki really the hidden culprit behind the incursions, or is someone else secretly manipulating the multiverse? Let us know your theory in the comments and subscribe to the channel to create your own timeline in the multiverse.